Welcome to The Responsible Resident. I'm Amber Stitt. This podcast takes a common sense approach to financial decisions for physicians, breaking down complex topics into something clear, practical, and usable. Because you shouldn't have to have a finance degree to build financial freedom. Imagine spending more than a decade becoming a physician. You make it through medical school, residency, and maybe even fellowship. You're finally earning the income you've worked so hard to build, and you decide it's time to protect it with disability insurance. Then you find out you don't qualify. Most physicians assume that only happens to someone with a serious illness. The reality is much more nuanced. I'm Amber Stitt, and welcome to The Responsible Resident, the podcast designed to help residents, fellows, and early career physicians make informed financial decisions with confidence. My goal is to help you understand how disability insurance and underwriting work so you can preserve your options before life has a chance to change them. Today, we're talking about the top 5 reasons physicians get declined for disability insurance, and more importantly, what you can do to avoid finding yourself in that situation. Let's jump in. The first situation: applying for disability insurance after a significant health diagnosis. One of the most common reasons physicians are declined is applying after receiving a significant medical diagnosis. Underwriting isn't about deciding whether you're a good physician with a healthy lifestyle. It's about helping an insurance company understand and evaluate future risk. Conditions like cancer, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, chronic kidney disease, arthritis, or neurological disorders may lead to a decline, a postponement, or an offer with exclusions depending on the circumstances. The important takeaway here is that every diagnosis is unique. A diagnosis doesn't automatically mean you'll never qualify, but it often changes the underwriting conversation. That's why one of the greatest advantages residents and fellows have is timing. During training, you're often younger and healthier than you'll ever be again. Even common conditions like anxiety, ADHD, and musculoskeletal disorders may still be insurable. The difference often comes down to understanding which underwriting approach is most appropriate for your situation. The best way to determine when to apply is to complete a medical pre-screen with your insurance broker. The second situation: applying for disability insurance during an active medical workup. This one surprises a lot of physicians. Maybe you've had abnormal lab work, a new psych medication, persistent fatigue, a neurological symptom, or unexplained dizziness that's still being investigated. From your perspective, you may feel perfectly capable of practicing medicine. From an underwriter's perspective, unanswered questions create uncertainty. Insurance companies generally prefer to understand the final diagnosis and treatment plan before making a long-term decision. They want to see a cause, a treatment plan, and resolution. That doesn't necessarily mean you should wait to think about disability insurance. It means you should understand your options before submitting an application. Sometimes waiting until a workup is complete produces a much better underwriting outcome than applying in the middle of the evaluation. The best way to determine when to apply is to complete a medical pre-screen with your insurance broker. I'd like to take a second to tell you about a free medical professionals blueprint that I created with you in mind. At some point in your career, you realize it's not just about making more money. It's about making decisions that actually support your life. That's exactly why I created the Pathways Perspective for Physicians. It's a simple, non-technical framework to help you think through your career, your money, your risk, and how everything connects as your life evolves. You shouldn't have to have a finance degree to build financial freedom. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need a place to start. You can download the free Medical Professionals Blueprint at stittstrategies.com/blueprint. The third situation: unresolved medical records. Sometimes your health isn't actually the problem. Your medical records are. Maybe you injured your shoulder several years ago. Maybe you had back pain that completely resolved. Or perhaps a physician documented a possible concern, but never documented that it improved. Underwriters review records differently than clinicians. If something appears unresolved, they're going to ask questions. One simple note from your treating physician documenting that a condition has resolved can sometimes prevent unnecessary delays or additional requirements during underwriting. It's one more reminder that preparing for underwriting isn't just about your health today. It's also about making sure your medical documentation accurately reflects your current health. If you finish a treatment plan, be sure to have a follow-up visit to confirm you are stable and doing well. Most physicians get better and fail to document the progress. The best way to determine when to apply is to complete a medical pre-screen with your insurance broker. The fourth situation, pending surgery or recommended treatment. Insurance companies don't like uncertainty. If you have a scheduled surgery or your physician has recommended a treatment that hasn't yet been completed, an application may be postponed until the outcome is known. If you are in the middle of physical therapy, you will need to complete the visits and have a documented resolution. The same can happen if a recommended treatment has been delayed. Once treatment is completed and your physician documents recovery without ongoing restrictions, your underwriting options may improve significantly. Every situation is different, but this is another example of why strategy matters. Submitting an application isn't always the first step. Sometimes planning the timing of that application is just as important, and your insurance broker can help with that. The fifth situation, underwriting red flags beyond your medical records. Not every underwriting concern comes directly from an active diagnosis. There are other factors that can significantly influence an underwriting decision. One trend I've seen more frequently in recent years involves a history of suicidal ideation or active eating disorders, even if in remission for a decade. These situations don't necessarily mean someone will never qualify for coverage, but they often require additional stability, treatment history, or time before favorable underwriting is possible. Another important consideration is self-prescribing medications. While physicians sometimes have prescribing authority depending on state regulations, insurance companies often prefer ongoing care managed through an independent treating physician rather than self-management. These are exactly the kinds of situations where you want to have a conversation with an experienced advisor before submitting a formal application. Being upfront about your history allows your advisor to develop the best underwriting strategy before your application is ever submitted. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one important message. There is no winging it when it comes to underwriting. There are strategies. Sometimes that strategy is completing an anonymous pre-screen before you ever submit a formal application. Sometimes it's waiting until a medical workup is complete. Sometimes it's reviewing your medical records to make sure resolved conditions are documented appropriately. And if you're a resident or fellow, there may even be access to a Guaranteed Standard Issue, or GSI, program through your institution. These programs may offer disability insurance with little or even no medical underwriting, depending on the program that's available. There are also situations where modified underwriting opportunities or other underwriting pathways may provide options that a traditional application alone would not. The important thing to remember is that you don't have to navigate underwriting by yourself. The goal isn't simply getting approved. The goal is understanding your options and developing the best strategy before you ever submit an application. Because the best underwriting outcomes rarely happen by accident. They happen through preparation, education, and strategy. That's what being a responsible resident is all about. Thanks for joining me for another episode of The Responsible Resident. If you found today's episode helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another resident, fellow, or physician who could benefit from understanding how underwriting really works. And if you have questions about your own situation or want to explore your options through an anonymous pre-screen before applying, we're always happy to help you understand what's available. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. If this episode helped you think a little more clearly about your next step, that's the goal. You don't need to have everything figured out, but you do need to take ownership and take a meaningful step forward today. Thanks for listening to The Responsible Resident. As a reminder, this podcast is for general educational purposes only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, and coverage options will vary based on your personal situation.